I have been saying for weeks, if not months, that West Virginia needs to become a run first, if not a run heavy team to be successful on the football field in 2023. Many Mountaineer fans have shared that sentiment, so it's no secret. And I think maybe Neal Brown's leaning that way, and I'm going to tell you why I think that is the key to success in 2023, and I have numbers to back it up. Also, Bruce Feldman wrote a great article in The Athletic that I think also supports my claim. So pull up a chair, sit back, relax, and let's talk about it. Ladies and gentlemen, this episode is brought to you by Dutch Miller Automotive, where friends and family pricing means you get the best deal right up front on any new or pre-loved vehicle in stock every time. With brands like Chevrolet, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Kia, Hyundai, Ford, GMC, Buick, and Subaru, the Dutch Miller Automotive family is always growing and ready to put you in the car or truck you've been searching for. Check out our inventory across West Virginia at DutchMillerAuto.com or come in today to the home of friends and family pricing, only at a Dutch Miller Automotive store near you. What is up, college sports fans, Big 12 fans, and fellow members of Mountaineer Nation, and welcome in to another edition of Couz's Corner. On tap in today's episode, we are once again focusing on my team, the West Virginia Mountaineers, and I'm going to hone in on why I think West Virginia needs to be a run-heavy football team in 2023, and why I think that's the secret to success, and why it will not only help their offense, but how it will impact their defense. We all know that last year the defense was bad. They were like 108th in the country in defense last year. And I think they have the formula, or at least have found the formula to improve that. Will they act on it? Will they act on it? First, let's talk about the article that Bruce Feldman wrote. I'm going to share a little bit of it with you as we talk. But what this article focuses on is the air raid offense and how it affects the defenses, the defensive coordinators, and the defense of that specific team. And we all know the air raid has really taken off in college football over the last couple of decades, and it really took hold at West Virginia beginning in 2011 with the arrival of Dana Holgorsen. It has continued with Neal Brown, although it is different. There's a lot of similarities to it. It's still an air raid concept with Neal Brown when he got here in 2019, and it has continued. Now, the title of this article by Bruce Feldman, and I will leave a link to this article in the description box, but it says of the video and or of the if you're listening on podcast platforms, it will be there as well in the show notes. But it says, "What is life like as an air raid defensive coordinator in college football? Let them tell you." Now, Bruce went out and interviewed several defensive coaches throughout the country, including former West Virginia DC and current NC State DC, Tony Gibson. Now, the first thing I want to talk about in this article, look, like I said, it's a really long article. I'm not going to focus on it, but here's the first paragraph I want to point out. It says, "The stats paint a grim picture. Among the lowest ranked defenses in yards per play last season, many were schools that ran a version of the air raid on offense. USC was 124th defensively. Louisiana Tech was 123rd in yards per play. North Carolina was 115th in yards per play. North Texas was 113th. West Virginia, 108th. And Houston, 102nd in the country in yards per play on the defensive side of the football. And all of those run a version of an air raid offense. So there again, shows how hard it is to be a defense for an air raid team. And we'll get into the reasons in just a minute. Most of you probably already know. Some of it's common sense. But the first part of the article talks about tackling and how sometimes air raid defenses on air raid teams are known as soft. Well, the reason for that is because early on in the original air raid, when they were first starting to implement this, a lot of coaches didn't want to do a lot of tackling at practice. For multiple reasons, but one of the reasons were they wanted to be more a quote unquote player friendly coach so they could attract more talent. Well, what they found out is the less tackling you do, the worse that you are at tackling in games. So a lot of these air raid coaches, Dana Holgorsen included, while he was at West Virginia, evolved and started doing a lot more live tackling at practice. As a matter of fact, Tony Gibson talks about that in the article. Let's go down here, and here's excerpt from the article. It says, all about evolution. NC State DC Tony Gibson became the DC at West Virginia 4 years into Dana Holgorsen's tenure as head coach. Another Leach protege, Holgorsen had made his own evolution that led to his best season in the Big 12 when their tempo and practice routine changed. And here's a quote from Tony Gibson. In 2016, our time of possession and the tempo we played with just slowed down, and we were really good on defense and we won 10 games. It was a different approach. We had a ton of live reps in practice, even into fall camp, where we were tackling to the ground. Dana really adapted to help the defense. We had more live stuff when I was with Dana at West Virginia than any place that I've ever been, end quote. So there again, you've got to do live tackling. In a press conference during the spring, I heard Neal Brown talk about that specific thing. One of the reasons West Virginia was bad on defense last year, and there were many, but one of the reasons is they were a poor tackling team. So he started doing more tackling at practice this spring. He said, we have to be more physical. We have to tackle better. Only way to do that is to do it more at practice. And he says that's what they started doing. Let's hope it pays off. The next section I want to talk about, and like I said, it's a really long article, so I'm only focusing on bits and pieces here. If you want to read the whole thing, go click the link in the show notes or the description box. Talks about tempo and pacing. A lot of air raid coaches want to snap the ball and run really fast. They snap the ball, they run a play, they get tackled, they run right back line of scrimmage, run another play really quick. That makes life really difficult for your defense because here's what happens. You either go 3 and out really fast or you score really fast. Now, scoring's not a bad thing, but what it does, it causes your defense to have to play more snaps and get on the field more. So by the fourth quarter, they're worn down, especially if you don't have a lot of depth. One of the reasons Bruce Feldman wrote this article was after watching USC struggle last year. They had such a great offense, but yet was not able to make it into the college football playoff and even lost their bowl game to Tulane because their defense couldn't hold up. And that's one of the things that defenses on these air raid teams do. They get worn down late in games. And a lot of it is because of the tempo and the pacing. The next section, tight ends. Now, West Virginia fans, you should be screaming amen with this one. When you look at most air raid offenses, they don't utilize the tight end a lot. Mike Leach almost never, if ever, used a tight end. So what happened? When his teams went into games against opponents who used a tight end, they had a hard time covering them because they didn't have to do it at practice. What you do at practice transitions into games. West Virginia fans, I want you to go back to 2012. It was our first season in the Big 12 Conference. We were 5-0 on the season, 2-0 in the Big 12. Geno was in the Heisman conversation. We were a top 10 team. Things looked great in Morgantown. We go into Lubbock, Texas, and get absolutely boat raced. I think it was 55-10 or something like that. If I'm not mistaken, Neal Brown was the offensive coordinator for that team, or at least a position coach. So he was there to witness that. But nonetheless, they got boat race at Texas Tech. One of the reasons, Texas Tech had a tight end named Jay Samaro, I think was his name. I think he's still catching passes. I mean, that guy ate West Virginia alive. And I read this article and a light bulb went off. I thought, man, wait a minute. West Virginia had not been defending tight ends at practice. The only way you can defend a tight end at practice in that air raid system was to send a defensive end or another player that doesn't play tight end out to run it on the scout team. That guy's not going to give you a great look because he's not a tight end. He doesn't play the position. It's not his fault. It's just not where he's comfortable. He's not going to know what he's doing. But if you play a true tight end and you've never faced one before, they're going to eat you up, especially a good one. So what did Neal Brown do this offseason? He goes out. He picks up LSU tight end Cole Taylor out of the transfer portal. He's a 6'7" pass catcher. Looks really good in the spring. Looked great in the spring game. One of our better looking players, in my opinion, in the spring game. Caught 3 passes. One of them was a really great one-handed catcher over the middle. He goes out and he gets him a tight end. So now, not only will that help us out offensively and give West Virginia's quarterback another weapon, it's our defense will have to go against him at practice every day. So they'll be better as well. So when they go play teams like an Iowa State or a Kansas State or these other teams in the Big 12 that have really good tight ends, they'll be better at defending it. So kudos to Neal Brown for picking him up out of the portal. One of the biggest pickups of the offseason, in my opinion. Talks about game planning against teams that don't run what you run. Not as big an issue in the Big 12 because most of the teams in the Big 12 run some form of air raid system. Talks about confidence issues. If you get burnt at practice every day as a defense, it's going to affect your confidence. But the last section I really want to talk about is this. It says, so why do the top-rated defenses often appear at places where fans tend to hate the offense? It seems a lot easier these days to identify who is a good offensive coordinator than a defensive coordinator when a coach's stock, at least statistically, can plummet dramatically from one year to the next. The top 5 scoring defenses in college football in 2022 were Illinois, Iowa, Air Force, Minnesota, and Georgia. Perhaps not coincidentally, those teams ranked number 78, number 110, number 131, number 126, and number 55 in offensive pass attempts per game. The more you run the ball, the better it is for your defense, the more balance. That's why they always talk about balance, balance, balance. Well, if you're going to be unbalanced, you need to be unbalanced running the ball, in my opinion. And that's where the numbers come in. And I think the more you run the football, in most cases, the easier it is for your defense. And let's look at some numbers that I put together for you. Hopefully you guys can see this okay. But when you look at it here on the screen, let's look at the Dana Holgorsen, Tony Gibson years. As you can see, in 2014, they ran the ball 51% of the time, averaged about 84 plays per game, so they had a really fast-paced offense. They were 101 in the nation in total defense, 99th in scoring defense, finished with a record of 7-6. In 2015, this was the first year I think Skylar Howard took over the team in 2015. They ran the ball 59% of the time. So almost 60% of the time they ran the ball. Their total defense went from 101st in the country to 66th. Scoring defense went to 72nd. They finished 8-5. Much better year. 2016. Skylar Howard, this is the 10-win season that Tony Gibson mentioned in the article. They ran the ball 58% of the time. They were 61st in the country in total defense. Still not awesome, but they were good enough to win 10 games. And they were 44th in scoring defense. So top 50 in the country in scoring defense. They ran the ball almost 60% of the time. Now, when you look at the seasons, and I've got the seasons in green are the ones they had good records. And if it's a red font, it means they had a really, really top-notch defense that year. You see 2018, that was the last year of Will Greer, his senior year. They passed the ball 50% of the time, were 106th in total defense, 90th in scoring defense. Finished 8-4, but that's only because their offense was electric. They could outscore teams. They got in shootouts and could outscore teams in a lot of cases. Then you look at the Neal Brown era. Now, there's an anomaly here in 2019. They passed the ball 58% of the time, and they were 74th in total defense, finished 5-7. But the only reason I think they passed the ball that much was because their run game was absolutely atrocious. We had a really young offensive line. We struggled to run the football, so they were forced to pass the ball a lot. They got in a lot of third and long situations and whatnot, so I had to pass the ball more than they probably would have liked to. When you look at that, under Neal Brown's watch, the percentage of passing has went down every year. This past season, 2022, they ran the ball 51% of the time, were 98th in total defense, 116th in scoring defense, were 5-7. They were 50-50 in 2021, 37 in total defense, 44th in scoring defense. Now look at 2020. 2020, this was the pandemic year. They were 6-4, won a bowl game over Army. They averaged about 76 plays per game, which is not, which is kind of somewhat fast, but not terribly fast. And they did pass it 53% of the time. So 2020 is a bit of an anomaly here. But their defense, that tells you how good their defense was, because most of these seasons, when you run the ball more than you pass it, your defense is better. That shows you this defense in 2020 was on the field a lot more probably, but yet we're still 4th in the country in total defense. That was the year Jordan Lesley took over as co-DC with Jamil Adai, I should say. Now, let's look at the Rich Rodriguez years, the 2006-2007 seasons, two of the best seasons in West Virginia football history. Okay. We had Pat White at quarterback. We had Steve Slayton in the backfield. But let's look at this. 2006, West Virginia ran the ball 72% of the time. They finished 11-2. Now, their defense wasn't out of this world. They were 52nd in the country in total defense and 48th in scoring, so they were decent. They were okay. Top 50. But they finished 11-2 because they ran the football 70% of the time and were really good at it. And they had a running quarterback. 2007, finished 11-2. Now, this year, their defense was stout. They were 4th in the country in total defense, 7th in scoring defense. Again, ran the ball 70% of the time. What does West Virginia have in 2023? They have a really good running back room, a really experienced offensive line, a quarterback that can run the ball regardless of whether it's Garrett Greene or Nicco Marchiol. They can go back. I'm not saying they're going to be as explosive as the Pat White, Steve Slayton teams, but there's no reason they can't be as good, in my opinion, as these 2015 and 2016 Dana Holgorsen teams where Skylar Howard was the quarterback. They finished 8-5 and 10-3. Their defense was 61st in the 66 and 61st in the country, respectively. What I say in one of my previous videos, I expect West Virginia's defense to at least be a top 50 defense, somewhere in that neighborhood. If they can do that and run the football 60 to 70% of the time, bada bing, bada boom, there's your winning formula, Neal Brown. West Virginia will have a more successful season in 2023 than they've had under the Neal Brown era if they will run the football at least around 60% of the time, maybe even more, depending on obviously the opponents and how the game goes. But there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's the key to success for West Virginia. Running the football 60% of the time is how Neal Brown is going to get this thing done, West Virginia, and win more games in 2023. I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section. For those of you watching on YouTube, this is a little bit longer than I normally go on these videos, but I wanted to go a little bit in depth on this one, kind of explain my reasoning, go over the article with you that Bruce Feldman talked about and how that West Virginia's defense could be much improved this year if they run the football. If they run the football. That's the key, in my opinion. Run the football 60% of the time, and I think West Virginia can win a lot more football games. Well, that being said, I want to hear everybody's thoughts in the comment section. If you're listening to this on a podcast platform, please go leave me a 5-star rating. If you leave me a 5-star rating and then send me a screenshot over at my email address, couz.walker@gmail.com, send me a screenshot of the 5-star review that you left me. I will mail you. Send me your mailing address at that email. I will mail you a Couz's Corner drink koozie for free. Okay. Leave me that 5-star rating if you're listening to this on a podcast platform. If you want to support me on YouTube, you can subscribe to the channel, guys. It's absolutely free. You can hit the thumbs up button, which is a like. You can share it out with your friends. You can drop a comment below. Give me your thoughts on not only the Bruce Feldman article, but also what you think West Virginia needs to do in 2023 to be successful. If you want to support me financially on the show, join the channel, become a member. You can hit the heart thanks button below, make a one-time donation. You can go to my merch store, buy yourself some Couz's Corner merch. And guys, please, for your next vehicle purchase, go check out our sponsors over at Dutch Miller Auto with dealerships all throughout the state of West Virginia. Go online, look up Dutch Miller Auto, find the location nearest you, and go check them out and let them know you heard about it right here on the channel at Couz's Corner. With that being said, I really appreciate your support. I appreciate you tuning into this episode. And until the next one, Q Country Roads.
West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home, country road.